I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
Let him know, JD, he ain't gonna come into the Oval Office throwing his shawl around.
The president has kicked Zelensky out of the White House.
Get out. OWT out.
His delegation right now is telling him that he's got to go home.
Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you.
Get out. And take that dog with you.
What is the reaction in European capitals?
First it was shock, but now that shock has become horror.
Well, if they were as quick to grab their purses as they are to clutch their pearls, maybe you wouldn't have to be over here begging for money.
3 days later.
Tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he would be open to restarting dialogue with President Trump.
That's right, they always come crawling back.
Trump.
What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. All right, you guys, so the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has decided that he's ready to talk Turkey with the United States again, not the country of Turkey. Please don't start with me this early in the video. You know what I mean? He's back, ready to talk, after probably having decided that he was a little rash on Friday during his last meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office. And I know I usually don't talk about politics like this, but I kind of had to since I constantly wear a Make America Great Again hat. Everybody knows I'm MAGA. So of course people hit me up in my comments on different social media platforms and like, how do you feel about your president now? How do you feel about the way your president just made us look stupid? I'm going to tell you guys the truth. I have never been more proud of a president, and I also have never been more proud of a vice president, because to me, JD Vance, in that little audition he did to show why he should be our next president, really did do exactly what I think a lot of us needed to see him do. Because over the last 30-some days now, people have mentioned, why is Elon everywhere? Where's JD Vance? JD Vance is supposed to be the vice president. Why Elon showing up everywhere? Well, that's very simple, because lately they've been talking about Doge, and that's his department. So when it came to JD, I know some people don't really like the way that I look at it sometimes, but the way that I see it with what happened with JD Vance and that situation the other day in the Oval Office is Donald Trump, whether anybody wants to acknowledge it or not, is a 78-year-old man. And boy, has he been running around in the 30-some days that he's now been president. He's been everywhere. He's been at the Super Bowl. He was at a NASCAR event. He's been doing all of the stuff that he's had to do as far as his presidential responsibilities go. And yeah, maybe everybody doesn't like everything he's done, but he has actually been working. So I can understand how he would feel like, I only have so much in me to argue with somebody, especially over some nonsense. And so JD Vance, being a young, spry 40-year-old, was like, I'll handle this. And that's what he did. He jumped in and he actually said what needed to be said. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, because the second part of that would be Donald Trump still has to be somewhat presidential when he's dealing with a person like Zelensky. And he had been being, in my opinion, as nice and as presidential as Donald Trump is going to be, which I know some people would argue that he's completely not presidential at all. And then some people would be like, he's completely presidential. I don't know what you're talking about. Neither side is going to be happy on my opinions on this, but I personally do like about Donald Trump that he's kind of rough around the edges and he's not your traditional president, which I think we all can agree on, no matter how extreme you are on either side. He is not your traditional president, but he does try to remain as cordial as he possibly can in certain situations. And in this situation, it had just gotten to the point where President Zelensky was being disrespectful. And I'm not even talking about the way that he was dressed. Never mind the fact that he was dressed like he was going to go pick his kids up from soccer practice. I mean, if you ask me, he showed up to the Oval Office dressed like he was there for a grinder hookup, which when the reporter asked him about that, I didn't think he had the best answer, and I thought he was kind of being sassy when he said that
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
If you ask me, he's wearing a costume right now. I know that he dresses that way because he wants to show solidarity with his soldiers that are fighting right now, but you're not on the front lines. And everybody knows that when you go to see your sugar daddy to ask for money, you put on your best party dress. Them's the rules. I didn't make it up. That's just what it is. And And I know some people would say that I'm being disrespectful by referring to Trump or the United States as Ukraine or Zelensky's sugar daddy, but that's kind of the situation we're in right now. And that's kind of why Zelensky should not have corrected him when Trump said that
they gave a lot, but they gave much less.
No.
Much less.
No.
And Zelensky argued that, and Trump treated it like a joke and had a good sense of humor about it.
No.
Don't argue with me.
No. Okay.
But you don't disrespect your sugar daddy like that in public, especially in front of the press. Is this your first time as a kept man? That is not the way you do that at all. And again, that's why J.D. Vance stepped in. And also when Donald Trump decided to take the gloves off and was like,
The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards.
And that's what it is, because whether or not anybody wants to acknowledge it, we'll get into it in the video right now. But the thing that people don't really want to acknowledge is that the United States is the single biggest benefactor to the Ukraine by a lot. So if there's anybody that Zelensky should show some respect to, it would be the United States, aka Donald Trump himself. That's who you want to be the nicest to, because really that's where your money, your aid, and your backing is coming from. So when you come out the side of your neck to try to sass him, of course, him and the vice president are going to jump in and get defensive about that. And I saw the videos of people being like, they just seem like schoolyard bullies to me. Well, sometimes that's what you need as a schoolyard bully. When you've got somebody that's not being realistic in their expectations and not understanding that a lot of us as Americans feel like, why are we giving this ingrate any money at all? I get it. You like to cosplay like you're a soldier, and I get that you think that your pride and your principles are a good reason for us to keep supporting you in this fight. But I think the United States really needs to say, go it alone. And when Europe is chiming in and saying, well, we're willing to do this and this and this, okay, we don't need to hear what you're going to do. Why don't you show the Ukraine what it is you're going to do? Put all your support behind them. Put all your eggs, no matter what they're costing right now, in that one basket and let it ride. So let's get into this video.
Tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he would be open to restarting dialogue with President Trump and is ready to sign a critical minerals deal with the U.S.
See, and I'm going to stop right here because I think this is a big part of why things went south. I think President Trump and President Zelensky had two different goals in mind when it came to this particular meeting. Trump wants a ceasefire and the agreement for the rare minerals signed, and Zelensky was there to get a guarantee for more backing and to use the rare minerals agreement as leverage, which again is disrespectful when you consider the amount of money that we've already given to the Ukraine. To go back and say, okay, let's kind of pretend that you didn't already give us this money and it's part grant and part loan, but let's just use the word give for now. So Zelensky is saying, okay, let's pretend that you didn't give us that money and just deal with this as moving forward. And Trump is saying, but we already did give you this money and really we're just here to smile for the cameras, shake hands, answer a few questions. We can discuss anything that we have to discuss in private, but for now, it's all smiles and handshakes for the press, which to me is why JD chimed in and said that it was disrespectful of Zelensky to try to litigate this in front of the press. And I know some people dispute the amount that Trump says that the United States has given to the Ukraine. According to Trump, the United States has given the Ukraine.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment.
But I was reading an article by the BBC that said that the estimate is between $119.7 and $182.8 billion. And you know what I call between $119 and $182 billion? Money I couldn't wipe my ass with. I mean, if I had known that this was the kind of change that Zelensky was looking for, I would have just blown the dust off my checkbook and written him a check right now to fund this war myself. As a matter of fact, Volodymyr, why don't you give me a call, get in contact, I'll fund your war for you. And I won't even ask for any of the money back. Let's go with the higher estimate, $182.8 billion. Let's round it up to an even $183 billion, not gonna quibble. You fly yourself to me, I'll take care of you. You take it, you do what you have to do with it, you make your little war happen. It's not a loan. Loans are how you lose friendships. The minute that money leaves my account, I never think about it again. You don't even have to send me a receipt for your flight over here since I went ahead and made up the difference so that you could fly yourself. I would assume private jet. If you don't want to fly private jet, go commercial. What do I care? You think I'm going to check a flight log? What does this look like? Steen Island? Now get your ass over here and come get your money. But seriously, how stupid about this can anybody be? To start getting mad because Trump says $350 billion, and I'm sure there is a way that he arrives at that number. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but a lot of the stuff that Trump has been saying has actually turned out to be true. And I don't know how many times the press is going to outright deny things that Trump says that do end up turning out to be true before people start acknowledging that Trump may have been whatever he was as a New York businessman, but as far as him being our president goes, I don't think that Trump is a source of misinformation, and I really don't feel like he's being dishonest in what he's trying to do. I really feel like Trump is an old man that realizes his life is coming to an end and wants to leave behind a legacy, and I think that legacy is him being a great president. That's honestly the way I feel about it, and that's why every once in a while I'll kick back and just let Trump do what he needs to do, and in certain cases even give him the benefit of the doubt when other people are mad about certain things. Like, I really do appreciate him protecting our money in this situation.
And we want to be able also to spend money on other things. We don't want to, this is a tremendous amount of money, and what the Biden administration did was terrible. They were giving money, but he had no security on the money. Europe, as you know, gave much less money, but they had security. It was in the form of a loan. They get their money back, and we didn't. And now at least we're protected because the American taxpayer has to be protected too.
Because that's why Doge exists, so that they can save American taxpayers money. Well, how would it look if the president that has Doge doing all they're doing just signs a blank check to Ukraine and is like, we fully got your back? It makes no sense at all. And the quibbling over the numbers is silly to me because the United States, no matter how you cut it, is the single biggest donor by a lot. So the BBC would bring up like Europe and how much Europe has spent. Well, you're comparing a continent and several different countries to the United States, which is one country. So in my mind, comparing the two really is apples and oranges. And I couldn't help but notice that BBC was especially generous with Europe because they also threw in Canada's money, which Canada is not part of the EU. The EU specifically describes Canada as one of the EU's official strategic partners. But like I said, not actually part of the EU. So let's go through these breakdowns and I'll tell you guys who's spending what as far as the Ukraine goes. Okay, so this is according to the BBC. The United States, $119.7 billion. I noticed they went with the lower estimate there, but $119.7 billion. Then you get to the EU, $51.3 billion. So we're already double what the EU is giving. And then we get to Germany, which is $18.1 billion. Then $15.5 billion from the UK, Japan at $11 billion, Canada $8.7 billion, Denmark at $8.4 billion, the Netherlands at $7.7 billion, Sweden at $5.7 billion, France at $5.1 billion, Poland at $5.3 billion, Norway at $3.5 billion, Finland at $2.8 billion. And the United States, on the low end, is $119.7 billion, possibly $182.8 billion, depending on what all you figure in. So when you look at it like that, and you look at it honestly, you can understand why Trump wants a ceasefire. Trump, I'm sure, wants to stop some of the spending on our end and some of the bloodshed from both Ukraine and Russia so that everybody can stop hemorrhaging and hopefully we can get a handle in some sort of agreement about this. But Zelensky, on the other hand, just wants to keep rehashing his story over and over And at a point, I don't mean to sound callous, but nobody cares but you and your people. I get it. Russia has been pretty terrible with you and your people. But at the same time, if you want to continue to fight over principles and past misdeeds, you're welcome to have that fight. But that doesn't mean that the United States has to have your back. That doesn't mean that our support is guaranteed to you. And that definitely doesn't mean that our money and our weapons are guaranteed to you. There will be a point when we feel like, okay, enough is enough. And if there was some sort of offer for a ceasefire on the table, and then everything else could be straightened out from there, at least that's a start towards peace. But Zelensky didn't want to hear it, and I did watch the full interview, and Zelensky just kept going back to,
he's a killer and terrorist.
and it's like, okay, well, I don't know how you think you're going to start any kind of peace negotiations when you keep saying that over and over. Yeah, you may feel that way, and again, say that in private. Say it in private to Trump. But if you're publicly, or Trump is trying to publicly start some sort of peace talks, that is not helpful at all. Before we go any further, I'm just going to ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. We're on our way to 100,000 subscribers. We're making really great progress, just short of 73,000 now. When you hit the subscribe button, make sure you click the bell to select all notifications so that you know every time I upload. Now let's get back to this story.
This after Zelensky turned his focus toward more than a dozen European leaders.
This is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe.
French President Emmanuel Macron.
I'm stopping right here because I honestly feel like Macron is a part of how this situation got out of hand. Because if you saw just last week on the news, Macron was correcting Trump on the way that the money situation works out with Ukraine.
Just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the U.S., loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have,
and that's different because right now France doesn't need us for anything. But I honestly do feel like Zelensky saw that and was like, I'm gonna go talk to him that way too. And it's like, don't forget that you're in a different position than Macron is. You actually do need something from us. Actually, you need a lot of things from us.
And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announcing today they will now work on a draft Ukraine-Russia peace proposal.
We've agreed that the UK, France and others will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. Then we'll discuss that plan with the United States.
I wonder why they would discuss that plan with the United States, aka Donald Trump. Probably because he's the only one that Putin respects enough to actually deal with. And I'm under no misgivings. I don't think Putin is the best guy in the world. I realize that I am gay, and Putin would likely unalive me with a quickness if I tried to show up in his country. I fully do understand all of these things. But I also do believe Donald Trump when he says that he and Vladimir Putin bonded.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me.
So I do believe Donald Trump when he says that the two bonded over that. And I do believe that Putin actually does respect Donald Trump. But anyway, my whole point to all of this is the news keeps saying that Europe is moving away to the United States. But for some reason, they're still saying that they're going to run this deal by the United States, aka Donald Trump. And I just wonder why that would be.
The meeting comes after Friday's contentious Oval Office exchange.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Playing cards.
Right.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the U.S. hasn't communicated with Ukraine since Friday, and two White House officials tell NBC News Trump is considering withholding any future military and financial aid.
And he should. If you want our money, if you want our backing, if you want our weapons, if you want our help, you're going to show respect and you're going to be grateful. Otherwise, you go it alone like the big boy you're pretending to be. And like I've already said, if Europe really has your back and Europe really supports you, then let them fully fund you. Let them figure out how to make up that either $150 billion or $182 billion or $350 billion. You know what's the best way for us to not ever have to argue these numbers again? Is if the United States just gives you $0 and 0 cents. Then you never have to worry about what the tally is. You never have to worry about respecting our president. You never have to worry about coming to the Oval Office. You never have to worry about putting on a costume to meet with anybody. That solves everything right there. Just stop getting money from us altogether. Stop asking us for support. Stop asking us for weapons. And go it alone like the superpower you apparently think you are.
That's what Zelensky did, unfortunately, is he found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue.
The contrast in Europe's approach, stark. Starmer saying he told Trump by phone this weekend about Europe's plans to now take the lead in initiating a deal.
Good. Let it be their problem. And little Marco Rubio put that really well by referring to it as Ukraine-splaining, because that's what it is. It's sort of like if your friend, they just got their ass kicked in a bar fight and you're like, okay, well, we just need to get you out of here. You're getting your ass kicked. Let's get you out of here. And they're like, no, you have to understand. You have to go back in there and fight them with me. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to go back in there and fight with you because I don't care why you're fighting anymore. And I don't need to hear the reason. I just know that you're getting your ass kicked or you're probably going to get your ass kicked. And I'm not going to go get my ass kicked with you and end up in jail or whatever other consequences I might suffer because you think that it's worth it to go back in there. So if you want to take your dumbass back in there, then take your dumbass back in there, but I'm not going with you.
A spokesperson for the Kremlin in remarks published today hailing Trump's skepticism of the current world order, saying, quote, the new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. This largely coincides with our vision.
And again, I know some people are going to get mad at me, but I honestly do feel like, and I said it during Trump's first administration, that we really do need a better relationship with Russia. We have been fighting, or at least in some sort of uneasy situation with Russia, since the beginning of time, basically. And I just feel like if we had a better relationship with Russia, then it would not only be good for the United States, but also good for the world in general. And I know some people are very pessimistic about that and feel like Putin will always be Putin and there'll always be a problem as far as Russia goes. But whether anybody likes it or not, the entire world is softening. And Putin isn't going to live forever. So whoever's in charge next might be just soft enough for us to have an even better relationship with that person, and so on and so forth. And then at some point, it's just something completely different from what it started off as. And maybe that's me being too much of an optimist. Again, feel free to tell me I'm stupid in the comments. Let me know how you feel about it. But that is honestly the way I feel about it, and I don't see anything wrong with starting to build those bridges. And sometimes your worst enemies turn out to be your best friends. That's something I've had in my own personal life. And I know some people would say that Russia and the United States are different and that's not a regular friendship. Okay, well then have your way. I'm not going to argue with you guys. Which of course I'm joking, but let me know down in the comments what you think. That's just where I'm at on it.
Democratic Senator Chris Murphy blasting the White House's handling of negotiations.
Now the White House has become an arm of the Kremlin.
I'll take that seriously when he's ready to admit that the Democratic Party has become an arm of domestic terrorism and far-left insanity. When everybody's ready to be honest, I'm 100% open to hearing it. And it's one of the reasons that I don't respect the left at all, because no matter what we end up having confirmed about people on the left or the terrible things that have been said about them, they will deny and pretend that those things completely did not happen. Like when they brought brought up Joe Biden's daughter's diary and the inappropriate behavior, inappropriate to say the least. I'm just not trying to get this video demonetized, but inappropriate actions by Joe Biden towards his daughter, according to her diary that she did confirm was her diary. Nobody on the left ever wants to talk about that, or us realizing after months and months and months of people telling us that he wasn't in cognitive decline, that Joe Biden is actually in cognitive decline. Nobody likes to talk about that. Nobody likes to actually accept or acknowledge that these things have now been confirmed. Instead, people pretend like they never happened, or nobody ever said them, or nobody ever denied them, or whatever they pretend, they pretend. So I can have no respect for the left, and I can also give them no credibility when that's the way that I've seen them handle things. And the left also always makes the mistake of thinking that the way that they see Donald Trump is the way that the world sees Donald Trump. Like, you always hear people on the left saying, the rest of the world is laughing at us. Well, I've heard so many people from other countries saying that they wish they had a Donald Trump. Like, if you talk to people in Australia and what's going on with their crazy as far as the trans community goes and what's happening with women's rights in Australia, you hear people saying in Australia quite a bit that they wish they had a Donald Trump. In England, you hear people saying that they wish they had a Donald Trump because of their immigration problem. Or even in Canada, there's a lot of people there that wish they had a Donald Trump because things have gotten so out of control. So when people say that the rest of the world is laughing at us, that's not necessarily the case. That's just the way that you want to paint it, because that's the way you cope.
Meanwhile, Vice President Vance's ski trip to Vermont drawing hundreds of demonstrators, some holding Ukrainian flags in support of the country.
Great. All the ones holding flags can start a GoFundMe and also go fight in Ukraine.
Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems.
And I'm sure they could use some well-fed, healthy American bodies, but until you're ready to put your money where your mouth is, both literally and figuratively, your opinions really don't matter. It takes no skill or courage to hold a flag on the side of the road.
Americans now also fractured over the path forward, as some congressional Republicans increasingly question Zelensky.
Either he needs to come to his senses and come back to the table in gratitude, or someone else needs to lead the country to do that.
I don't love Mike Johnson, but I agree with him on that. If Zelensky is too emotional to talk peace on any level, he needs to step aside and let somebody else do it.
Vaughn Hilliard is joining us near the president's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. And Vaughn, all of this comes as the president prepares for a big speech to the nation this week.
Hallie, that's right. We expect the president to address the war during that speech to Congress, but his own national security advisor just today expressed skepticism that the U.S. could get Russia and Ukraine both back to the negotiating table. Hallie?
That's the story, and to that end that he just gave, where he said that they may not be able to get both parties back to the table, I'd imagine what he was talking about right there, since they said that Trump hasn't talked to Zelensky since Friday, that means that Russia might not be open to it anymore, and any ideas that they had may be off the table, which, as my older and even more crass sister used to say, no sweat off my tits. If Russia doesn't want to come back to the table, that'll just have to be on Zelensky. Because if you listen during the full exchange between Zelensky, Vance, and Trump, you will hear Trump repeatedly telling Zelensky, you have not ever tried this with me before.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins.
You tried it with Obama, you tried it with Biden, but you've never had me negotiating or mediating the agreement. And Zelensky just wouldn't hear it. He just kept saying, but it was an American president, but it was the United States. And Trump just kept trying to tell him that he has a different relationship with Putin. And instead, Zelensky was shaking his head. He was rolling his eyes. At a point, people even suspect that he called J.D. Vance a bitch under his breath in Russian or Ukrainian. I'm not sure which. I don't speak Spanish. But he was just being overall disrespectful and wouldn't hear of it. So if you can't take anything in when people are trying to help you out and talk some sort of sense to you, even if that's not what you want to hear in that moment, you may not be the man for the job. And that's something that Zelensky may not want to accept, but at the same time might be something for him to seriously consider, whether or not he's the guy for that job. Like, he may consider himself to be a war president, but at some point it might be time to move past being a war president and more towards being a peace president. And if you're not going to be that guy, then step aside and let your country find that guy if they don't already have somebody in mind. And if you're not open to that, then go ahead and suffer your own consequences and let your country suffer your consequences right along with you. Anyway, that's where I'm at on it. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. If you want to see a video about the real reason that the transgender actor from Euphoria, Hunter Schafer, got upset because her passport got changed back from female to male, click the link. Other than that, as always, thank you for watching. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.
They bought into his bullshit.